Hello and thanks for joining us for our mid-morning edition of Arirang News. I'm Mark Broom. Let's kick things off with a look at the day's headlines. South Korean skiers are set to fly to North Korea very soon to take part in some light training in the north. The trip is part of the Winter Olympics diplomacy between Seoul and Pyongyang. Ding ding, round two. South Korea and the US make a second attempt in Seoul to thrash out their differences over their FTA. The discussions come under the cloud of the Trump administration's decision to slap safeguard measures on certain South Korean products. Plus, what do you get when you have a supermoon, which also happens to be the second full moon of the month, passing through Earth's shadow during a total lunar eclipse? A super blue blood moon, and it's happening tonight. Our top story this morning, though, Seoul's Unification Ministry says 45 South Korean skiers will be flying to North Korea at the top of this hour for a two-day training session in the north. This after the two sides appeared to have been skating on rather thin ice after North Korea canned a joint cultural event with the South ahead of the PyeongChang Winter Olympics. Our Ji Myung-gil starts us off.
South Korea will send non-Olympic skiers to the North Masikryong Ski Resort for 2 days of joint training as part of a series of planned events ahead of the Winter Olympics in South Korea. A group of inspectors from the South visited the venues in the North last week to look around the facilities, the airport and road conditions. The South Korean skiers will take a charter flight to the North Galma Airport, which is around 45 minutes away from the Masikryong Ski Resort. The joint events during the PyeongChang Games are seen as a thawing of ties between the two Koreas. However, a telegram from the North late Monday reportedly blamed biased and insulting media coverage from the South on the North planned events for the Olympics. The North was also angry at South Korean media reports of a possible military parade in Pyongyang on February 8th, a day before the opening ceremony of the Winter Games. South Korea's Unification Ministry said the North's sudden decision was regrettable, adding that the North should uphold all the remaining agreements that have been made. Those are the art performances and taekwondo demonstration. The North is also sending hundreds of delegates, cheerleaders and performers to the South over the course of the Olympics. The inter-Korean talks, which resulted in the agreement, came after tensions on the Korean peninsula reached their highest point in decades. But there have been concerns that the links between the Koreas could breach international sanctions on North Korea's nuclear and missile programs.
Providing hard cash is not allowed, but apart from that, we can practically provide any conveniences they might need, as the U.S. has welcomed the North's participation as well.
Providing cash payments to the North regime is banned under UN sanctions. South Korea earlier said it would not pay the fees for using the North airport and airspace. Ji Myung-gil, Arirang News.
South Korea's National Olympic Committee has confirmed the final list of athletes who will represent the country at the PyeongChang Winter Olympics. The host nation is sending 144 athletes to compete in all 15 sporting categories. It's South Korea's largest ever team for a Winter Olympics, clocking in at 73 athletes more than the last Winter Games in Sochi. They will be welcomed to the Olympic Village in Gangneung on February 7th, 2 days before the opening ceremony. Gangneung is where all the ice events will be held. South Korea is aiming for 8 gold medals and a top 4 finish in the medal rankings. And the head of the International Olympic Committee is already here in South Korea, checking up on the last-minute preparations for the PyeongChang Games and preparing for a whole slew of meetings. For more on Thomas Bach's first day in Korea, here's Lee Seung-jae.
It was day one in Korea for IOC President Thomas Bach, who arrived at the host city of the 2018 Winter Olympics via a KTX bullet train from Incheon International Airport, pulling into Jinbu Station, where he was greeted by dozens of Olympic volunteers. After a short meet and greet, Bach sat down for talks with the PyeongChang Winter Olympic Games Organizing Committee on a series of pressing matters as the Games are now less than 2 weeks away. Bach asked Lee Hee-bum, the head of the organizing committee, about the major issues and challenges facing the opening ceremony, with Lee saying the freezing cold weather was the biggest concern. Meanwhile, Bach showed great interest in the first ever joint Korean women's ice hockey team, praising the little things the team is doing for team chemistry, as the South Korean players threw a small birthday party for their North Korean teammate Jin-ok on Monday.
To learn the news about the birthday party among the players yesterday, that is the Olympic message, that is the Olympic spirit.
With the first ever Winter Olympics in Korea kicking off with the opening ceremony on February 9th, Bach will stay in PyeongChang throughout the duration of the Games, which will end on February 25th. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Now, laying the groundwork for possible talks between the U.S. and North Korea, the top nuclear envoys of Seoul and Washington are set to meet in South Korea next week for related discussions. South Korea's foreign ministry confirmed Tuesday that Seoul's top nuclear envoy, Lee Do-hoon, will meet his visiting U.S. counterpart Joseph Yoon next Monday for a joint consultation on issues related to North Korea. The envoys are expected to discuss ways to start dialogue between Washington and Pyongyang following the recently resumed inter-Korean discussions that led the North to take part in the PyeongChang Winter Olympics. And ahead of that meeting, South Korea's top nuclear envoy is leaving for Russia today to discuss ways to deal with the regime's nuclear and missile ambitions. The South Korea-US defense cost-sharing agreement has to be reset considering reality and fairness. That's what Elbridge Colby, US Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense, said at a press briefing this week in the United States. Asked whether it isn't contradictory to strengthen the alliance with South Korea, but at the same time seek to negotiate on the defense cost share, Colby answered, "You wouldn't expect your friend to be unfair when working together." He stressed South Korea has become one of the most prosperous countries in the world, and the US has already spending a large share of its defense budget on supporting forces abroad. The comment comes amid speculation the two countries could soon start negotiations on defense costs. The man who was widely rumored to be the next US ambassador to South Korea is not going to get the nod after all. The White House has confirmed that Victor Cha will not be considered for the position that has been vacant for months on end now. The Washington Post says Cha, who served as the Director for Asian Affairs on the White House National Security Council during the George W. Bush administration, was dropped over his disagreement with the Trump administration's considerations of a limited military strike on North Korea. It's thought he also didn't see eye to eye with the president on his threats to terminate the South Korea-US FTA. The lack of a top US diplomat in Seoul for so long has raised concerns over the Allies' ability to closely coordinate at a time of heightened tensions over North Korea's nuclear and missile programs. Meeting with top government officials over his administration's policy objectives on Tuesday, President Moon Jae-in again urged all-out efforts to improve and protect lives of the people, calling it the government's #1 priority. Hwang Ho-jun with the details.
It was the first meeting of its kind since the launch of the Moon administration. President Moon Jae-in chaired a workshop on Tuesday, bringing together at the Blue House all the government's ministers and vice ministers. Just the day before, the ministries had finished briefing Prime Minister Lee Na-kyun on their policies for 2018, which the president said the workshop was meant to consolidate.
오늘 워크숍은 새해 정부 업무 보고를 종합하면서 더 나은 국민들의 삶을 위해 정부가 해야 할 일을 공유하고 결의를 다지는 자리라고 할 수 있습니다.
According to the presidential office of Cheongwade, about 150 people were in attendance, including all 24 ministers and ministerial level officials, as well as some 60 vice ministerial level officials. In the meeting, President Moon said the Republic of Korea owes its establishment, its democratic history, and its economic growth to the sacrifices and the participation of the people. He said now the government must look back at whether it has taken care of the people and should take on a great sense of responsibility. The South Korean president also said that the people must be the priority in everything the government does. He re-emphasized the need for nationwide safety checks on public facilities, no matter how long it takes or how much it costs. He also reiterated the importance of raising the minimum wage, which his government did at the start of this year, and creating more quality jobs for the people so they can have the opportunity to work and ensure a minimum living standard. President Moon insisted that all government policies must be pursued from the people's perspective and called for more active and genuine communication between the public and the government. The liberal leader also called for innovation within the government. He said, quote, public officials themselves may become the target of innovation if they fail to become its main agents, and urged them to take the lead in building a fair and just society. And last but not least, President Moon stressed that all ministries should strive to cooperate since they're all in it together.
장차관 여러분이 다 함께 바라봐야 할 대상은 대통령이 아니라 국민입니다. 여러분은 문재인 정부라는 한 배를 탄 공동 운명체입니다.
President Moon's remarks about the government doing its utmost to protect people's lives come after a string of deadly accidents, including a fire at a local hospital last week in which 39 people died and more than 150 others injured. Hwang Ho-jun, Arirang News.
Now, opening a new chapter on tackling sexual harassment. It's an issue that has gained widespread public attention around the world since the Me Too movement spawned in the United States. And now a female public prosecutor here in Korea has come forward with her own experience of sexual harassment by a then government official. Her story has led to calls for greater protection for women in the workplace. Park Hee-jun reports.
The Me Too movement has been sweeping America, and women are also starting to speak up in Korea. A female prosecutor has come forward to shed light on a sexual harassment case within the prosecution office. Seo Ji-hyun, a public prosecutor at the Changwon District Prosecutor's Office, posted on an internal board on Monday that she was groped by then Senior Justice Ministry official at a funeral back in 2010. She demanded an apology from the alleged offender, who was revealed to be An Tae-gun, but she was instead transferred to an unwanted post in 2015 after being given a disciplinary warning for a lack of performance. Former prosecutor An says he does not recall the incident and denies being involved in Seo's transfer or any kind of cover-up. Seo said she was inspired by the global Me Too campaign, where women around the world have brought awareness to sexual harassment. She also appeared on a primetime cable television news program on Monday, during which she opened up about other similar incidents concerning her co-workers. After watching the news, members of the public have been filing petitions on the presidential office's website demanding a thorough investigation into the case. President Moon Jae-in also addressed the allegations during a workshop for top government officials on Monday, calling for a shift in social attitudes so women do not have to fear sexual harassment or sexual assault in the workplace. He said it's important to form an environment where victims are able to speak up without fear and urged officials to make the issue a priority. The Ministry of Justice has also ordered the prosecution office to conduct a fair and just investigation into the incident and to look into whether there are additional cases similar to Seo's. Park Hee-jun, Arirang News.
The ruling Democratic Party of Korea says boosting people's safety is its utmost priority this year. In a policy speech at the National Assembly, floor leader Woo Won-sik said that making a safe country is a key state task and the only way to prevent unfortunate sacrifices. Boosting safety has become a key agenda following a string of recent fires that killed scores of people. He also vowed to keep the economy on the recovery track by fostering a fair economy, by reforming the country's conglomerates and also fostering manpower and infrastructure in line with the so-called Fourth Industrial Revolution. The floor leader also promised to swiftly carry out reform of power organs of the country to restore democracy and a constitutional amendment that's focused on bettering people's lives. He also called for cooperation on the opposition so that North Korea's participation in the PyeongChang Winter Olympics can be the start of pursuing peace on the peninsula. A second round of FTA renegotiations between South Korea and the US kicks off today. Trade representatives from the two countries are meeting in Seoul this time around after holding their first meeting in Washington. The talks, which will run through Thursday, come a matter of days after South Korean manufacturers were hit by the Trump administration's recently implemented safeguard measures against South Korean residential washing machines and solar cells. It also comes after President Trump again slammed the FTA as a disaster and a job-killing pact for his country. Seoul maintains the FTA benefits both countries by expanding trade and improving market access. The second round of talks will likely centre on key issues such as automotive parts, something the two weren't able to agree upon last time around. Korean tech giant Samsung Electronics seems to have outdone itself yet again. The company posted sales worth $223.4 billion last year, putting out its best performance report ever on strong demand for memory chips and sales of high-end display panels for the iPhone X. Its operating profit was over $50 billion, nearly double from the year before. Looking at the company's quarterly figures, operating profit was at $14 billion in Q4, up over 64% on year and landing in the company's initial estimate. The company's shares also spiked 41% last year. Now, for a moment, you might want to set your alarm for on January 31st, so tonight for us in Korea, half of the Earth, parts of Western and Northern America, Asia and the Middle East, Russia and Australia will experience a very special moment, a super blue blood moon. And it's going to be the first time in many decades that the world will witness a total lunar eclipse. Our Park So-yeon with the details.
On Wednesday night, skywatchers will be able to enjoy a special cosmic 3-for-1 deal, a super blue blood moon. Half the world will witness to not just one, but 3 uncommon events: a lunar eclipse, a supermoon, and a blue moon. Individually, the 3 aren't that rare, but the last time all 3 occurred at the same time, a celestial trifecta, was 35 years ago. The super blue blood moon combines a supermoon, which is a full moon that is closest to Earth, a blue moon, the second full moon of the month, and a lunar eclipse, a phenomenon that occurs when the Earth casts a shadow over the moon.
The supermoon looks especially big due to it being closer to Earth. The blue moon and the blood moon, for all 3 to occur simultaneously, is a once-in-a-lifetime event, a very rare moment.
In South Korea, you can catch the show from 8:48 p.m. when the moon enters the darkest part of the Earth's shadow, the umbra, during the period of the partial eclipse. From 9:51 p.m. to 11:08, the moon will turn a deep shade of dark red when it undergoes a totality, the period when the moon is totally covered, or the total eclipse. The rest of the visible eclipse will end at 12:11 a.m. on February 1st. The whole process will last as long as an hour and 12 minutes depending on your location. So you may want to catch this once-in-a-blue-moon moment, a truly once-in-a-lifetime event. Park So-yeon, Arirang News.
Now, for a look at the stories making headlines around the world, and only one place to start today, and that is with US President Donald Trump's first State of the Union address. This extremely highly anticipated speech to Congress and millions of Americans is going to start in just over half an hour's time. For more on this and other news, let's turn to our Noah Adam. So Adam, what can we expect from Trump's debut State of the Union address?
Well, Mark, on Monday, White House spokeswoman Sarah Sanders said the economy will be, quote, front and centre, and Trump will likely take credit for the US economic gains in the past year. The trend of lower unemployment and higher growth began under his predecessor, but Trump argues the tax overhaul he signed into law late last year has boosted business confidence and will lead companies to reinvest in the United States. Furthermore, Trump will likely mention plans to rebuild America's infrastructure and continue his demands for renegotiating or even scrapping trade deals with other nations. He is also expected to push for bipartisan congressional action on immigration reform with a possible deal with the Democrats. At the heart of his proposal is overturning a decision to scrap the so-called DACA program, in which around 700,000 young illegal immigrants known as Dreamers were protected from deportation. Trump, in return, is hoping to secure billions of dollars for his proposed border wall with Mexico, as well as cuts to legal immigration levels. If the issue is touched upon, then it would be interesting to see the reactions from dozens of Democratic lawmakers who are bringing Dreamers as their guests to watch the primetime address. The general goal of Trump's maiden State of the Union address will be to rally support as he struggles with record-low approval ratings and battles a probe into his campaign's alleged ties with Russia. Recent data shows the Eurozone economy outpaced that of the United States for the second straight year in 2017, recording its strongest growth in a decade. The European Union Statistics Agency said Tuesday that Eurozone GDP rose 2.5% last year, far ahead of the 1.8% reached a year earlier. It's also the fastest growth rate since a 3.0% rise in 2007, just before the financial crisis. The data lends support to a rosy outlook given by the IMF last week, which said the global economy will expand 3.9% this year and the next. The 2017 growth figures for the US and China, meanwhile, were 2.3% and 6.9% respectively. US firms led by some of the world's richest people will form a healthcare company aimed at cutting costs for more than 500,000 of its American employees. The company, to be set up by Amazon, Berkshire Hathaway and JP Morgan Chase, will not aim to make profit and initially focus on technology to provide what they called simplified, high-quality and transparent healthcare. In a statement on Tuesday, Berkshire Hathaway chairman Warren Buffett called skyrocketing costs of healthcare in the United States the, quote, hungry tapeworm on the American economy. The announcement of the new firm sent shares in the broad healthcare sector sharply lower in early trading.
Good morning. The capital area received some unexpected snow on Tuesday, so drive with caution. Despite much milder temperatures than Tuesday, it's still way below the freezing mark this morning. But at least dry weather alerts have lifted here in the capital, while the rest will continue to have dry conditions. On that note, here are the daily highs for the day. Seoul will get up to 1 degree Celsius under mostly sunny skies, while Busan and Jeju will make it to 6 degrees this afternoon. Now the cold snap will return this Saturday, while this Sunday is Ipchun, a seasonal term that marks the beginning of spring. So we would expect conditions to warm up accordingly, but not for the time being. With that, let's take a look at the international weather for viewers around the world. While most cities in the nation will see temperatures a few notches higher than Tuesday, most cities in North Korea will still have highs below sub-zero temperatures. And as for the rest of Asia, Beijing and Tokyo will be under plenty of sunshine, while Manila and Bangkok will have a rainy Wednesday. Meanwhile, almost a month's worth of rain soaked Melbourne overnight, and more showers are in the forecast along with strong gusty winds. And heading to North America, heavy rains kicked off a week of wet weather across Metro Vancouver region, and expect to see ongoing showers for the time being. And as for South America, Santiago and Buenos Aires will be hot and sunny with highs in the low 30s. And taking you to Europe, those of you in Berlin, Paris, and London will need to have an umbrella handy. And lastly, to Africa, the Korea and Cape Town will see winds picking up in the afternoon. And that's all the weather update for now.
And that's where we're going to leave our mid-morning edition of Arirang News as well. Our next bulletin is coming up at noon Korea time in around an hour and a half from now. So until then, goodbye.